A single-engine plane ripped through the quiet Montana night, its cry devoured by thunder as it spiraled toward a cornfield near Bozeman. Inside a weathered cabin lit by one stubborn lamp, a former Marine paused mid-breath as the sound died, a silence so absolute it carried the weight of memory. Then his German shepherd, Rex, lifted his head, nostrils flaring. The sharp scent of fuel and ozone reached him before it did his master. He grabbed at Ethan's sleeve with urgent teeth, tugging him toward the door, toward the storm waiting outside. Out there, beyond the trembling trees and the scream of wind, a stranger's life hung in the balance. Ethan had the training. The dog had the instinct. And the decision they made in that moment would alter 3 lives before dawn. If you believe no man, or animal, should face the storm alone, make sure you stay until the end. Bozeman wore its storm like a bruise refusing to heal. Low clouds pressed against the Gallatin Range, flattening the horizon into shadow. The air tasted of wet sage and iron. Across the valley, the land darkened to one vast shape, fences and pastures swallowed by dusk. At the far edge of town, a small cedar cabin braced itself against the weather. Inside lived Ethan Granger, 34, a former U.S. Marine whose frame still carried the quiet precision of discipline. He was tall and lean, his shoulders squared by years of endurance. His skin was roughened by desert sun, his knuckles marked with small stories, like the pale crescent scar from a Humvee hood in Kandahar. His hair remained regulation short, brown now flecked with gray at the temples. His face was clean-shaven not for vanity but for order. Ethan's manner was spare, yes when yes was enough, silence when silence spoke louder. Yet behind that calm, he held a wit dry enough to light a match and a gentleness he didn't quite know how to explain. That tenderness had survived war and found refuge in a dog. Rex was 5, a German shepherd of deep sable fur brushed with charcoal across his back, 85 pounds of intelligence and lightning-fast reflex. His eyes were amber and knowing, his ears ever alert. A faint nick marred one ear, a memory from a winter fence, and gray already dusted his muzzle. He wasn't a retired K9. He didn't need to be. Ethan had trained him himself, with the same exactness once reserved for mission drills: sit, stay, heel, down, find the wrench, leave the porcupine alone. Come, always come. Rex's loyalty wasn't aggressive, it was attentive. He watched the world the way a friend watches a door in a crowded room, protective, ready. The cabin smelled of cedar smoke, coffee, and the last split log of the day. Rain pattered its testing rhythm across the tin roof, dripping through a seam into a pot Ethan had placed on the counter without complaint. He did most things that way now, accepting what came as though it were weather. He'd spent the day at Bramble and Sons Auto, an honest place with grease in the floor's pores and a radio that hummed old country songs everyone pretended not to know. He'd come home with sore knuckles, a folded paycheck, and just enough peace to call it a day. Dinner was stew, venison, onion, carrot, and a bay leaf for comfort. Rex lay on the braided rug, paws crossed, eyes calm. Ethan served him first, as always, setting down the dented steel bowl. "Okay," he said softly. Rex ate with quiet dignity, no scramble, no rush. When done, he sat again, as if gratitude too was something learned. "You and me, pal," Ethan murmured, stretching his back. He spoke to Rex the way a man talks to the one witness who truly knows him. He told him about the stubborn carburetor, the kid who called brake pads, those sandwich things, the weather rolling in. He didn't mention Sarah, not out loud. But she moved through the cabin all the same, as memories do, light as dust, impossible to sweep away. Sarah had been the kind of woman who turned an ordinary room forgiving. Dark hair always tied low when she gardened, hands steady, laughter first. She had grown up where water was scarce, and kindness was currency. When her mother fell ill too young, Sarah turned soft where others might have turned hard, and stayed that way. She had chosen Montana because, she said, big skies make a man honest. 2 years had passed since she died, and honesty still met Ethan at the door every night like the wind. The radio crackled out a weather warning, severe thunderstorms, high winds, possible hail. Ethan turned it off. He didn't need a forecast to know what was coming. The window above the sink showed a sky bruised and heavy. The cabin's small flaws, hairline cracks, a missing knob, patched glass, glowed faintly in that twilight. Rex rose and huffed at the door, tail low. "We'll check the gutters when it passes," Ethan said. He was a man built for work, not wanting. He washed the pot, stacked firewood, set his tools aside. Then he opened the door and stepped onto the porch. The rain's true voice met him, steady, filling, alive. A gust bent the trees, shaking silver-green leaves into motion. Ethan breathed deep, letting himself be small beneath the storm's weight. Rex pressed against his leg. "Storm'll clear the air," Ethan muttered. "Might help the creek." Lightning stitched white seams through the clouds. Thunder rolled through his ribs. The power flickered but held. Ethan checked the flashlight, tested its beam, and set it near the door. The world didn't ask for permission before it changed, he'd learned that long ago. The storm found its full throat. Rain came hard, like the sky tipping a bucket. The wind slammed the roof tin once, flat and angry. Then Rex froze. Ears sharp, body taut. Not the kind of alert he gave for deer or passing trucks. This was a different stillness, the one that listens with its bones. Ethan went still too. Beneath the roar of rain, he caught it, a strained whine of machinery, higher pitched than a tractor, uneven, faltering. He stepped into the storm, scanning the sky. The sound rose and dipped, gasping like a machine choking on air. "That's not right," he said under his breath. Instinct overrode thought. He grabbed his field glasses from the hook near the window. The clouds were so low the valley felt like a closed room, but then, a tear opened. Through it, a smudge of white moved fast, lights blinking red-green in panic. The plane was far too low. The propeller coughed once, twice, then died. The silence that followed was terrible and deep. "Rex," Ethan said, steadying himself with the name. The dog's tail tucked slightly, body braced. Thunder cracked so hard it rattled the plates. Then came the sound, the blunt, final impact of something heavy hitting earth. The ground trembled underfoot. Ethan was already moving. Flashlight. Boots. First aid kit. Mylar blanket. He reached for his truck keys, then stopped. The dirt road would be a swamp by now. On foot would be faster. He turned. Rex sat square, eyes locked on him. "Ready." "You're with me," Ethan said. He snapped on the reflective collar, clipped the lead, not to restrain, but to anchor in chaos. He glanced once at Sarah's photo on the shelf, her hair tossed by meadow wind, smile wide, alive. "We've got a job," he said quietly. The door blew open under the storm's shove. Rain hit him like cold nails. He stepped out and felt his body remember, how to move low in mud, how to count lightning to thunder, how to read sky from shadow. Rex trotted beside him, swift and sure. Together they crossed the yard, flashlight beam cutting a tunnel through silver rain. The trees loomed like black sentinels. Beyond them, the cornfield heaved under the storm. The smell came first, fuel and scorched metal, sharp and wrong. Ethan swung the light. The beam caught twisted aluminum half buried in soil, a wing snapped like a limb. The hiss of heat fought against the rain. "Easy," Ethan murmured, though the word was meant as much for himself. Rex sat, trembling with tension. Something moved inside the wreckage, or maybe it was just the storm breathing. Ethan swallowed, gripped the flashlight tighter, and stepped forward. Rex tugged once on his sleeve, the question clear, "Now?" Ethan nodded. "Now." And together, man and dog ran into the broken field, toward the burning dark. The wreckage hissed and groaned, a wounded beast pinned to the earth. Flames licked where the rain couldn't reach, orange sparks clawing at the wind. Ethan skidded down the muddy furrows, flashlight beam bouncing off bent metal and shredded stalks. Rex bounded beside him, fur slicked tight to his ribs, ears speared forward, tail slicing the rain. Up close, the plane looked like a gutted bird, its nose half buried, wings torn, wires spitting small electric tongues into the storm. The air stank of fuel and oil, and that terrible sweetness of burnt plastic. Ethan swept his light through the shattered cockpit, and froze. A woman was inside. Her head slumped against the cracked plexiglass, dark hair tangled with blood and rain, the harness biting into her shoulders. "Damn," Ethan muttered. He pressed closer, shielding his eyes from the sparks. Lightning flared again, giving her face color for a split second, pale as marble beneath streaks of soot. Her chest rose once, faintly. "She's alive," he breathed. Rex barked once, short, sharp, scanning the field before locking eyes on Ethan again, as if to say, "Then what are we waiting for?" Ethan tried the cockpit door. The hinge shrieked but held fast. He shoved harder, knuckles scraping against jagged edges. Blood mixed with rain. For an instant, his mind flashed to another door, a sand-caked Humvee under gunfire, Sergeant Mason Carver yelling on the other side. Mason hadn't made it. The door hadn't opened fast enough. Not tonight. Ethan hooked his fingers under the seam and hauled with a growl that came from somewhere old and buried. Pain tore through his palm, but he didn't stop until the hinge surrendered with a cry of twisted metal. Inside, the woman stirred, a broken sound escaping her lips. Her features sharpened in the light, strong cheekbones, elegant even through grime, lips chapped and pale. A silver watch hung shattered around her wrist. "I've got you," Ethan said, voice hoarse. He drew his knife, sliced the harness strap, and caught her as she sagged forward. She was lighter than he expected, but limp weight grows heavier with every second. The smell of aviation fuel clung to her skin, the rain washing it down her collar. Rex nosed Ethan's wrist, tongue flicking across the cut in his palm. That small touch grounded him in the chaos, a reminder that he wasn't alone out here. "Good boy," Ethan muttered. Flames roared behind him. The wing had caught, the heat surged. He tightened his grip on the woman, cradling her against his chest, one arm beneath her knees, one around her shoulders, and started running. "Move, Rex," he barked. They were halfway across the field when the explosion hit. The sky tore open with sound. Heat slammed Ethan's back, throwing mud into the air. A blast wave rippled outward, flinging shrapnel like hail. Ethan slipped, boots sliding in the slurry, but he didn't let go. Rex lunged forward, grabbing Ethan's sleeve and yanking down with desperate strength. They dropped into the mud just as a shard of burning metal hissed past where Ethan's head had been. The debris scattered across the field in a rain of fire. The ground shook, the storm screamed its approval. Ethan curled around the woman, shielding her from the debris. Steam rose where rain met molten wreckage. His heart hammered, blood mixing with the mud. Beside him, Rex crouched low, eyes locked on the burning ruin, every muscle taut but steady. Somehow, against all of it, the faint brush of breath touched Ethan's throat. She was still alive. He exhaled, a long, shaking sound that might have been prayer. By the time the storm spent itself, the Montana night had collapsed into a weary drizzle. Flames dwindled to smoldering ghosts among the corn. Inside Ethan's cabin, the woman lay stretched across his worn leather couch, wrapped in a blanket. A kerosene lamp glowed on the mantel, its light trembling against the walls. Rex rested at her feet, chest pressed to the rug, eyes watchful. The place smelled of smoke, rain, and coffee that had burned too long on the stove. The furniture bore the look of use rather than comfort, scarred table, mismatched chairs, a stove that hissed when damp crept in. The cabin was small, but it had held storms before. Ethan sat nearby, bandaged hand throbbing beneath gauze. Fatigue weighed on him, but alertness refused to fade. He sipped cold coffee, eyes fixed on the stranger who'd fallen from the sky. She looked fragile against the rough leather, skin pale, hair tangled, one arm bound in makeshift bandages. He knew nothing about her except that she'd fought the storm and nearly lost. Rex lifted his head once, gaze flicking between the woman and Ethan, then lowered it again with a soft huff. Outside, dawn pushed through the mist. The woman moaned, a small, strained sound, as if her body resisted waking. Her eyes fluttered open, gray-green and clouded with confusion. She tried to sit, winced, and sank back. Ethan leaned forward. "Easy. You're safe," he said, voice calm, the same tone he'd once used to settle young soldiers in chaos. She blinked, focusing on his face, then glanced around the room, at the timber walls, the stove, the unfamiliar dog lying guard. Rex growled softly, not in threat, but warning. The woman froze. Slowly, she extended a trembling hand toward him. Rex sniffed, ears shifting, and after a moment's pause, laid his head back down. Ethan's brow lifted. "He doesn't trust easy," he said. "Neither do I," she replied, voice hoarse but steady. For a moment, the only sounds were the rain outside and the whisper of fire in the stove. Ethan fetched her a glass of water. She drank slowly, her grip trembling less with each sip. When she spoke again, her tone carried quiet authority. "My name is Alexandra Pierce." Ethan's gaze flicked up, recognition faint but certain. "Pierce Technologies?" he asked. She nodded once. The name stirred old headlines in his mind: innovation, power, billions. The kind of empire that existed far from fields and dirt roads. And yet, here she was, barefoot on his couch, wrapped in a blanket that smelled of cedar. Her composure reasserted itself by degrees. Even bruised and bandaged, she held the posture of someone used to command. The torn remains of her tailored suit clung to her frame, mud-streaked but unmistakably fine. A fractured silver watch still circled her wrist. Rex stood, stretched, then circled once and lay near her again. She reached a second time, palm open. This time, he accepted it, nose brushing her skin before retreating. Ethan exhaled softly. "Guess he sees something in you." The faintest hint of a smile touched her lips. Morning light crept through the window, pale and cold. Ethan reheated coffee on the stove and offered her bread and jerky, the best the pantry had to give. She ate with quiet dignity. Outside, thunder grumbled one last time as the storm drifted east. But inside, the silence felt different now, less empty, more like something waiting to begin. By noon, the storm had thinned into mist, wrapping the valley in a soft gray hush. The air outside smelled of damp pine and diesel from the distant highway. Inside, the world felt suspended between aftermath and calm. Ethan sat at the table nursing his third cup of coffee, half listening to the low hum of the stove. Across from him, Alexandra Pierce, cleaner now, though pale and bruised, watched the rain bead along the window. Her right arm rested in a makeshift sling Ethan had crafted from an old flannel shirt. Rex, stretched out near the hearth, kept his gaze steady on her, the soft gold of his eyes catching the firelight. He had relaxed, but only just. When the quiet stretched too long, Ethan broke it. "You're lucky to be breathing." The plane went down hard. "I remember the storm," she said, her voice low, deliberate. "Then nothing but light and noise. I was flying myself. Should've grounded earlier." "Should've," he agreed, pouring another inch of coffee into her cup. She accepted it with a faint nod, studying him the way executives study markets, quietly measuring what they can't yet place. "You're ex-military," she said, though it wasn't a question. "Marine," Ethan replied. "A while back. I could tell by the way you moved out there." He shrugged, unwilling to elaborate. Silence returned, companionable this time. The rain had softened to a drizzle, the kind that sounded more like memory than weather. Then came a noise alien to the valley, the rhythmic chop of helicopter blades. Ethan's head lifted, eyes narrowing. Rex was already on his feet, barking once, sharp and warning. The sound grew louder, joined by the crunch of tires on wet gravel. "What the hell now?" Ethan muttered, moving to the window. Outside, two black SUVs rolled up the dirt road, water splashing beneath their wheels. The helicopter banked low over the cornfield, sending a gust that flattened the wet grass near the porch. Alexandra didn't flinch. If anything, her shoulders straightened. "My team," she said. "I was overdue. They've found me." Ethan gave her a look, half disbelief, half irritation. "You didn't think to mention people might come dropping from the sky next?" "I wasn't exactly in a position to brief you," she said dryly. The SUVs stopped near the porch. Doors opened in perfect synchronization. Men in dark suits stepped out, broad-shouldered, precise, scanning the surroundings with practiced eyes. One wore an earpiece, murmuring into his wrist mic as his gaze swept the tree line. Rex's growl deepened, a low thunder in his chest. A tall man in dark glasses and an immaculate suit approached the cabin, shoes unsuited for Montana mud. He knocked once, crisp and commanding. Ethan opened the door halfway, one hand resting on the baseball bat leaning against the wall. "You're lost," he said flatly. "Mr. Granger." The man's tone was polite but impersonal. "We're here for Ms. Pierce." Behind Ethan, Alexandra stood. Even wrapped in a borrowed sweater and sling, she carried herself with authority. "It's all right, Jordan," she said. "Tell the pilot to stand down." "Ma'am," Jordan began carefully, "you should be in a hospital, or at least somewhere with better lighting than this place." "The roads are flooded," Alexandra replied, her voice calm but final. "I'll stay here tonight. We move tomorrow." Jordan hesitated, unused to being overruled. His jaw flexed, then he nodded. "Very well, ma'am. We'll secure the perimeter." Ethan stepped aside just long enough for them to glimpse Alexandra, then shut the door before they could argue further. The sound of engines idling faded as the men retreated to their vehicles. Ethan turned to her, incredulous. "You'd rather stay here than at whatever fancy hotel they had ready for you?" Alexandra gave a small, tired smile. "Sometimes quiet is worth more than comfort." Rex gave a short chuff, tail tapping once against the floor as if in agreement. Ethan shook his head, half amused despite himself. "Suit yourself." For a while, they sat in companionable silence broken only by the drip of rain from the eaves and the faint hum of the stove. Outside, the security detail set up their silent watch among the trees. Inside, the cabin felt oddly fuller. By evening, the drizzle had faded into thin fog. The mountains surrounding Bozeman rose like ghosts in the distance. From the chimney, a steady stream of smoke climbed into the pale air, carrying the smell of wood and stew. Inside, the small living room glowed with amber lamplight. Alexandra sat on the couch, her slinged arm resting lightly on a pillow. She looked less like a CEO and more like someone rediscovering how to breathe. Across the room, Ethan moved between stove and table, boots creaking on the wooden floor. He ladled stew into two chipped bowls. Rex hovered nearby, tail swaying, his nose twitching at the scent. "The project I was flying to discuss," Alexandra began, her tone softer now, "was called Icarus. Our most ambitious yet." Ethan set the bowls down. "Sounds like something that fell out of the sky." She allowed a faint laugh. Irony noted. "But this one's meant to help people rise again. It's a neural interface, something that lets people with paralysis or severe mobility loss interact with computers, even machines, through eye movement or small neural signals." Ethan paused mid-motion, her words catching somewhere behind his ribs. She continued, her voice gaining quiet intensity. "Imagine a veteran who can't walk commanding a prosthetic leg as naturally as breathing. Or a child who can't speak finding a voice through tech. That's what Icarus is meant to do." Ethan carried her bowl over, setting it gently in front of her. "I've seen men broken," he said. "Lost everything to explosions and shrapnel. If something like that existed back then," he trailed off, shaking his head. Rex settled by Ethan's chair, patient and alert. Ethan placed a smaller bowl on the floor, no onions, just stew. "Okay," he said. The shepherd waited for his nod before lowering his head to eat, movements neat and deliberate. Alexandra watched, intrigued. "You feed him like he's family." Ethan glanced down. "He is." He scratched behind Rex's ear. "Rules. Respect. Routine. He eats with discipline because I owe him that." For a moment, the only sounds were spoons against ceramic and the soft rhythm of rain outside. "This stew," Alexandra said after a few bites, "tastes like something I haven't had in years." "What's that?" "Real food." Ethan gave a faint smile. "Don't tell me the billionaires forgot how to cook." Her laugh was small but unguarded. Conversation began to find its rhythm. Alexandra told him about her grandfather, an old Air Force pilot who had taught her to fly. Ethan shared fragments of his time overseas, the heat, the camaraderie, the nights he didn't talk about. Rex lay quietly between them, amber eyes flicking from one to the other, as though he understood more than either suspected. Later, as Alexandra wandered the cabin, her gaze landed on a framed photo, a woman standing beside Ethan by a lake, fishing rod in hand, her laugh frozen mid-motion. The glass was cracked across one corner. "She was beautiful," Alexandra said softly. Ethan's voice came low. "Sarah. My wife. She taught high school science. She made people better just by being around. 3 years after I came home, she was gone. Car crash." His jaw tightened. "That was a battle I couldn't win." Alexandra replaced the frame gently. "I'm sorry." Ethan gave a small nod, his hand resting on Rex's head. "Since then, it's just been me and him. The work keeps the lights on. The nights, not so much." Outside, thunder muttered faintly along the ridges. Alexandra opened her mouth to respond, but Rex's sudden growl stopped her. He bolted upright, body rigid, gaze fixed on the window. His bark came low and warning, rolling through the room like distant artillery. Ethan was already up, fingers curling around the bat near the door. Through the rain-streaked glass, a flicker of movement crossed the tree-line, too tall to be deer, too steady to be wind. The figure paused, then melted back into the mist. Alexandra's voice was calm but sharp. "One of yours?" Ethan shook his head, eyes narrowing. "My men don't skulk." Rex's hackles stayed raised, his growl a low hum of warning. The comfort of moments before evaporated, replaced by something taut and cold. The storm outside had passed, but another had begun to gather, silent and unseen, beyond the trees. By dawn, the storm had drained itself dry, leaving the Gallatin Valley slick with dew and the smell of wet earth rising like breath. A pale Montana sun crept slowly over the ridges, turning the mist silver. Ethan stood by the window, mug of coffee in hand, watching the charred outline of the cornfield. Even from here, he could still see where the wreck had burned into the ground, a dark scar cutting through the new green shoots. Behind him, Alexandra sat at the table, her hair brushed back neatly, her arms still bound in a sling he'd made from torn flannel. She wore a simple gray sweater he'd loaned her. Even stripped of her suits and polish, she radiated composure, a woman who'd spent her life commanding storms larger than weather. Rex lay near the door, half awake, ears twitching toward every sound outside. Once in a while, he'd rise, nose to the air, as if the shadow from last night still lingered among the trees. Ethan rinsed his hands in the sink. The cut across his palm stung when the cold water touched it, a sharp reminder of how close they'd come. He'd slept little, his mind replaying that glimpse of movement near the tree-line, the way the mist had swallowed it whole. Whoever, or whatever, it had been hadn't returned. But the unease remained, heavy as stone. The quiet was broken by a sound that no longer belonged to the wilderness, the dull, steady thrum of rotors rolling across the valley. Ethan looked up sharply. Moments later, black SUVs crunched over the gravel drive once more. A sleek helicopter circled overhead before settling into the meadow beyond the cabin. The downwash scattered leaves and sent Rex's hackles up. The door swung open before Ethan could reach it. Alexandra's team stepped out again, efficient as ever, dark suits, mirrored glasses, scanning the area with precise, professional movements. Among them this time was a man Ethan hadn't seen before, tall, wiry, with sandy blonde hair slicked neatly back and glasses perched on a narrow nose. He moved fast, tablet in hand, tension clinging to him like static. "Miss Pierce," he called, relief cutting through his polished tone. "We've been searching all night. The board's in full panic. We need to get you back to San Francisco immediately." Alexandra didn't rise at once. She took a slow sip of coffee, eyes following the sunrise before turning toward him. "Good morning, Michael." "Good morning." The man nearly laughed. "Ma'am, do you have any idea how?" "I do," she interrupted gently. "And right now, what I need is a moment." Michael Grant, her chief aide, Ethan guessed, exhaled hard through his nose, clearly unaccustomed to being delayed. Ethan leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "Guessing that's your right hand?" She nodded. "He's efficient. Overprotective. Sometimes both at once." Michael turned toward Ethan, as if only just noticing him. His expression flickered with the kind of polite confusion reserved for strangers who don't fit the expected script. "And you are?" "Ethan Granger," Alexandra answered before he could. "He's the reason I'm standing here." Michael blinked, taking her words in. "You mean?" "Yes," she said simply. "He pulled me out of the wreck." The aide hesitated, eyes shifting between the Marine's mud-streaked boots, the bandage on his hand, and the quiet dog watching from the corner. He seemed to weigh whether to thank or dismiss him, then thought better of both. Ethan saved him the trouble. "I'm just a mechanic," he said evenly. "Nothing more." Alexandra's gaze lingered on him for a beat longer than necessary. Then she spoke, her voice softer. "Mr. Granger, there's an event in San Francisco next month, the official unveiling of Project Icarus. I'd like you and Rex to come as my guests." Ethan frowned. "That's not my world." "Maybe not," she said. "But it's the same world you saved." He shook his head. "I fix engines. I live quiet. Black-tie galas and billion-dollar speeches aren't exactly my speed." At his feet, Rex rose and padded over to Alexandra, sniffing at her sleeve. When one of the SUVs opened its door, Rex walked to it, pawing gently at the paint, tail wagging once before turning back toward Ethan. Alexandra smiled faintly. "Looks like someone disagrees." "He's just curious," Ethan said, though even he didn't sound convinced. Michael checked his watch, impatience leaking through his polished professionalism. "Miss Pierce, we really must leave. News outlets are already speculating about a crash in this area. Every hour increases the chance they trace it back to you." Alexandra stood, her spine straightening like someone stepping back into armor. She reached into her coat pocket and drew out a plain envelope, edges slightly damp from the morning fog. She held it out to Ethan. "Call it what you will," she said, "gratitude, repayment, a way to patch what the storm left behind. Inside is enough to repair your truck, fix the roof, and maybe take a breath for once. I won't insult you by calling it charity. It's a debt, mine." Ethan didn't take it. "I didn't do it for payment." Her gaze held his, steady and sincere. "I know. That's why I trust you with it." Something unspoken passed between them, not the polished courtesy of boardrooms, but the raw, wordless understanding of two people who had both stood in fire and lived. Then the moment broke. Alexandra's team moved to escort her out. Rex barked once, sharp and insistent, as if trying to hold her there. Alexandra turned, hand brushing briefly over the dog's head, her voice warm. "Thank you, soldier," she said softly. The helicopter's blades roared to life. Alexandra stepped into the SUV, the door shutting with a solid click. Ethan stood on the porch until the convoy disappeared into the morning haze. The wind smelled of wet sage again. The valley returned to silence. He looked down at the envelope still sitting on the table where she'd left it. For a long while, he just stared at it, then tucked it into a drawer he rarely opened. Days passed. Then weeks. Life fell back into rhythm. Mornings at Bramble and Sons Auto, evenings with Rex by the stove, the cabin quiet except for the creak of wind through the eaves. Yet the silence felt different now, less like peace, more like waiting. Sometimes, late at night, Ethan would catch Rex staring up at the sky, ears pricked at the distant hum of aircraft. And though he said nothing, Ethan felt the same pull, something unfinished still circling overhead. Then, one crisp morning about a month later, a delivery truck rattled up the gravel drive. A young courier in a ball cap hopped out, handed Ethan a padded parcel, and drove off with a wave. Ethan slit the tape with his pocketknife, expecting the carburetor parts he'd ordered. But inside was something else, a sleek folder embossed with the Horizon Technologies insignia, 2 plane tickets tucked neatly within, and a small velvet box. He opened it. Inside lay a collar, not leather, but brushed steel woven with polymer fibers, sleek and futuristic. Along the front, one word was engraved in clean, precise letters. REX. The dog padded over, sniffing the box, tail wagging slow and cautious. His eyes caught the light, amber, patient, waiting. Ethan turned the collar over in his hands. It was light, cool, and faintly humming with circuitry. He could almost hear her voice behind the gesture, "Don't say no too quickly." He sighed, setting the box on the table. "She really doesn't quit, does she?" Rex nudged the box again, then sat back on his haunches, watching him expectantly. Ethan met his gaze, something half a smile tugging at his mouth. "You want to see the city, huh?" The shepherd's tail thumped twice against the floor, the sound of quiet persuasion. Ethan looked at the collar again, then out the window, where the morning sun was burning through the fog. Somewhere far away, in the heart of steel and glass, the next chapter was waiting. "All right, boy," he said finally, picking up the box. "Looks like we're going." Rex's ears perked, eyes bright. The sound of his tail striking the wood was like a heartbeat, steady and certain. San Francisco rose before them like a crown of glass and steel, its skyline catching the last gold light of dusk. The air carried the salt of the Pacific and the low hum of a restless city, a rhythm so far removed from the slow, grounded silence of Montana that Ethan felt it in his bones. He sat in the back seat of a sleek black SUV, Rex settled beside him, head high and eyes alert. The German shepherd's ears flicked with every car horn and shifting shadow outside, nose twitching at the flood of new scents, asphalt, exhaust, sea air, 1,000 human stories colliding. Ethan adjusted the collar of his only suit jacket, borrowed from a friend at the auto shop, trimmed by the town's only tailor just for the trip. He already felt like a man dropped into the wrong movie. Ahead, Horizon Tower loomed, a gleaming monolith of white glass and steel, wrapped in ribbons of light that pulsed like a heartbeat. It wasn't just a building, it was an announcement. The SUV slowed beneath the portico, headlights cutting across polished stone. Through the tinted doors, the lobby shimmered, all glass, chrome, and quiet wealth. As they stepped out, Rex pressed close to Ethan's leg, tail steady but low. His reflection flashed across the polished floor, dark coat gleaming under soft gold light. Inside, a woman approached briskly. She was tall, in her late 40s, her chestnut hair swept back into a tight bun that spoke of decades spent keeping chaos orderly. Her expression softened when her eyes found Rex. "Mr. Granger," she greeted warmly. "Welcome to Horizon Tower. And this must be Rex, the hero we've all heard about." "Ma'am," Ethan replied, giving a small nod. Rex sniffed her offered hand, then allowed a brief scratch behind the ears, tail flicking once. The woman smiled. "He's more disciplined than most executives I've met." "Old habits," Ethan said simply. "I'm Margaret Lane," she introduced herself. "Visitor relations. Miss Pierce is waiting for you upstairs." She led them to an elevator guarded by biometric panels that glowed blue at her touch. The ascent was silent except for the faint hum of machinery and the muffled beat of Ethan's pulse. When the doors slid open, the world became white and bright, a maze of glass corridors and sleek surfaces that smelled faintly of ozone and innovation. Behind one of the frosted panels, a lab thrummed with quiet energy. Alexandra stood there, speaking with two engineers. Her arm, once bound in a sling, now moved carefully but freely. She turned at the sound of the door, and her face, usually a mask of composure, broke into something warmer. "There you are," she said softly. "Welcome to the heart of Horizon." Rex trotted forward first, tail sweeping the air before he stopped at her feet. Alexandra crouched carefully, resting her uninjured hand on his head. "Still the most reliable man in the room," she murmured. Ethan's lips curved slightly. "He's been promoted a few times lately." She rose and gestured toward the lab. "Come. I want to show you what you helped save." Inside, young engineers moved like clockwork, white coats, glowing screens, coffee cups, and restless energy. The hum of servers filled the space. One of them, a compact man in his 30s with a perpetual shadow of stubble, looked up eagerly as they entered. "Miss Pierce, perfect timing. The Icarus sensors are ready for the dynamic stability test." Alexandra smiled faintly. "Dr. Patel, this is Ethan Granger and Rex." Dr. Robbie Patel grinned. "Ah, the legends. Just in time. If Rex cooperates, we can finally prove the algorithm's adaptability." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "You need my dog to test your invention?" "In a sense," Alexandra said. "Icarus needs to perform under unpredictable motion. We've tested it with machinery, drones, even prosthetics. But nothing matches the fluid complexity of an animal in motion." Ethan frowned. "You mean you want to turn my dog into a lab rat?" Alexandra met his gaze steadily. "No. I want him to be our proof that it works." The technicians cleared a small obstacle course, low ramps, motion panels, infrared markers glowing faintly along the floor. Alexandra lifted the brushed steel collar from its velvet box, the same one she had sent to Montana. It glimmered under the lab lights. "May I?" she asked, holding it out toward Rex. Ethan hesitated. Then he nodded once. "He trusts me. I'll trust you." She crouched and fastened the device gently around Rex's neck. The collar hummed faintly, a line of soft green lights pulsing along its edge. "There," she whispered. "You look like you belong in the future." Rex turned his head toward Ethan, as if asking for confirmation. "Go on, buddy," Ethan said. Alexandra stepped back. "Ready, Dr. Patel." Patel's fingers danced across the tablet. Data streamed onto the screens, graphs, vitals, movement lines. "All right, Rex," he said cheerfully, "let's see what you've got." At a low whistle from Ethan, Rex sprang forward, tail up, body taut with purpose. He moved like wind made flesh, leaping cleanly over a low barrier, circling a moving panel, pausing just long enough for Ethan's next signal. Every motion translated perfectly onto the monitors. Patel's voice rose with excitement. "Stable signal, zero interference, no latency. This is incredible." A young technician, Julia Marks, her hair braided tight, watched the data scrolling upward. "Dynamic variance is under 2%, she breathed. "That's impossible." Ethan watched from the sidelines, arms crossed, pride buried beneath his calm expression. Rex finished the final run, stopped in front of Ethan, and barked once, clear, confident, waiting. Ethan crouched and ruffled his ears. Good boy. The team applauded quietly. Alexandra's smile deepened. Ladies and gentlemen, meet the newest member of Horizon's future. She looked at Ethan. And the man who reminded me what courage looks like. He shifted awkwardly, unused to being anyone's headline. I just did what anyone should have done. Not everyone does, she said softly. For a moment, amid the sterile hum of the lab, their eyes met, the Marine and the innovator, bound by something that had started in fire and rain. That evening, Horizon Tower transformed. The sterile lab became a ballroom of glass and gold, its walls washed in soft light. Chandeliers caught the city glow and scattered it across crystal glasses and polished marble. The Icarus launch gala had begun. Ethan tugged uneasily at his dark blue tie. Alexandra's assistant had insisted he wear it. Rex, freshly brushed, walked beside him, the new collar gleaming faintly beneath his sable coat. Heads turned as they passed. Across the room, Alexandra moved through the crowd like a tide of calm, her gown a deep black that shimmered with motion, her posture regal, her smile perfectly measured. She caught Ethan's eye once from across the room, and for a moment, the noise of champagne flutes and soft strings faded. She inclined her head, a small, private acknowledgement. Ethan exhaled slowly, not realizing until then that he'd been holding his breath. That was when he saw him. A man stood near the bar, tall, silver-haired, dressed in a midnight tuxedo sharp enough to draw light. His posture radiated ease, but his eyes, steel gray and amused, watched the room like a predator assessing prey. Victor Mercer. Even Ethan, who avoided newspapers, recognized the name. Mercer Technologies, Horizon's oldest rival. A man known for swallowing smaller companies whole and smiling while he did it. Mercer lifted his glass slightly in Alexandra's direction, the gesture polite but glacial. She saw him, and her smile froze just enough to betray a flicker of something Ethan hadn't seen before, fear wrapped in contempt. The evening moved forward, speeches, applause, a live string quartet playing over the city's heartbeat. Then, somewhere between toast and encore, the lights flickered. Once. Twice. A hush rippled through the hall. Ethan's instincts snapped awake. The chandeliers swayed, shadows shifting. The massive wall screens that had been looping the Horizon logo sputtered, once, twice, and then filled with static. Rex's ears shot up. A low growl rolled from his chest. Something was wrong. The lights dimmed again. Guests murmured. Staff hurried toward side corridors. Then Rex tugged sharply at Ethan's sleeve, a move too deliberate to ignore. What is it, boy? The dog pulled again, harder, then darted toward a hallway leading off the main lobby. Ethan followed, every muscle alive with old training. Down the corridor, the air smelled faintly of ozone and metal. At the far end, half hidden in shadow, a man in a staff uniform crouched by a junction box, hands buried in wires that sparked faint red. His cap shaded his face, his movements too quick, too urgent. Hey! Ethan barked, his voice cutting through the noise like a command. The man jerked upright, startled, then bolted. Rex launched forward, faster than thought, blocking the exit, barking once so loud it shook the air. The intruder tried to shove him aside, but the shepherd lunged, teeth catching the man's sleeve, forcing him back toward Ethan. Ethan slammed him against the wall, wrenching a black device from his grip, small, rectangular, pulsing with red LEDs. Not a tool. Something far worse. What the hell is this? Ethan hissed. The man didn't answer. His eyes darted, not to Ethan, but toward the gala hall beyond. Ethan turned instinctively, and across the shimmering distance, through the glass partitions, he caught sight of Victor Mercer. The rival CEO stood perfectly still among the chaos, watching with an unreadable smile. By the time Ethan looked back, the intruder had gone rigid in silence. Alarms began to hum faintly through the tower. The crowd in the gala murmured louder, confused, uneasy. Rex's fur bristled. The storm that had started in the Montana sky had followed them here, only this time, it wasn't made of rain. The alarms didn't scream, they whispered. A low, pulsing tone that slid beneath conversation like a warning only soldiers and animals could hear. Ethan's fingers tightened around the black device he'd taken from the saboteur. Its red diode blinked faster now, each flash echoing in his chest. Rex pressed close to his leg, rumbling softly, eyes fixed on the trembling light. The corridor filled with the faint tang of burning circuits. Security to Corridor 4, Ethan barked toward the ceiling. His voice carried authority even in a place where he had none. Within seconds, 2 uniformed guards appeared, their expressions sharp, movements rehearsed. "This man was rigging something to your system box," Ethan said, handing one the pulsing device. "He bolted when I called out." The older guard frowned, examining it without touching the contacts. "This isn't ours." "Find him," Ethan ordered. They sprinted down the hall, weapons drawn. When he turned back, Alexandra was there, her gown trailing like a shadow of smoke, eyes clear but hard. "You found it before it went off." "Barely." Her gaze darted to the device, then to the direction the saboteur had fled. "Mercer," she said quietly, the name almost a breath. "He's been trying to breach our systems for months. I didn't think he'd risk something this public." Ethan studied her face. "What would he gain from turning your Gala into a blackout?" She exhaled, the sound small, weary. "Control. Or chaos. For men like him, they're the same thing." Behind them, the hum of voices from the ballroom rose, confusion, fear, the rustle of heels against marble. Somewhere, the orchestra faltered and stopped. Alexandra lifted her chin, mask slipping back into place. "We have to reassure them before panic spreads. Then I'll handle Mercer." Ethan stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You shouldn't face that alone." She looked up at him, eyes searching. "You didn't come here to fight my wars." "Maybe not. But I know how fast one starts." Rex gave a low bark, as if agreeing. Inside the main hall, the air felt charged, brittle. Guests clustered near the exits, murmuring into glowing screens. Security staff moved like dark currents through the glitter. Alexandra climbed the small stage again. The house light steadied, someone had restored partial power. The giant Horizon emblem flickered, then shone steady behind her. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, voice even, strong. "We've had a minor systems disruption, now contained. Your safety is not in question." The crowd's restless whisper slowed, but didn't stop. From the back of the room, Victor Mercer raised his glass, smiling thinly. "Minor disruptions do have a way of making major impressions, don't they?" Laughter rippled, brittle and false. Alexandra's gaze pinned him. "I see some still confuse sabotage with showmanship." His smile didn't move. "Competition inspires innovation, Alexandra. Surely you of all people believe that." Ethan stepped to the edge of the stage, watching Mercer the way a soldier watches movement through smoke. He caught the faint flick of Mercer's hand, a subtle signal to someone near the exit. "Security," Ethan said softly into the calm the guards had given him, eyes on the west door. Rex tensed beside him, nose lifted. Moments later, a guard's voice crackled in reply. "Sir, suspect detained, matches description. Carrying additional devices. Looks like he meant to overload the power grid." Mercer's smile faltered just enough for truth to show through. Alexandra's voice cut the silence cleanly. "Thank you, officer." Then, to the crowd, "Horizon will cooperate fully with authorities. For now, please enjoy the evening." Applause, uneasy but obedient, rose and faded. The guests turned back toward the buffet and the music starting again, pretending nothing had cracked. When the crowd dispersed, Alexandra stepped down, her poise slipping the moment she was out of sight. She caught the edge of a table for balance, the color draining from her face. Ethan reached her side. "Hey." She waved him off, forcing a breath. "Just dizzy." "I'm fine." But she wasn't. He could see the tremor in her hand, the faint sheen of sweat along her temple. "You're not fine," he said quietly. "Sit." She sank onto a chair, jaw tight. "It's a side effect. The implants, they're still integrating." He frowned. "Implants?" She hesitated, then pulled aside the edge of her gown sleeve, revealing a thin scar along her upper arm, metal glinting faintly beneath the skin. "When I said Icarus could change lives, I meant it literally," she whispered. "The prototype runs through me." Ethan stared, trying to piece together what she meant. "I was diagnosed 2 years ago," she continued. "A degenerative neural disorder. Slow, unstoppable. The kind that steals everything one cell at a time. I built Icarus because I refused to let it take my mind while I still had it." Her words hung heavy between them. "So you're saying?" "I'm the first human interface," she said. "Every test, every breakthrough, my body's been the proving ground." Rex shifted closer, resting his head against her knee. She smiled faintly, hand brushing his fur. "He understands pity better than people do." Ethan's voice was low. "Mercer knows." "Yes," she said. "And if he gets access to the Icarus code, he'll sell it to the highest bidder. He doesn't care what it does, only that he controls it." Silence settled, broken only by the soft hum of the tower's restored lights. Ethan crouched beside her. "Then we make sure he doesn't get it." She looked at him, something fragile and fierce sparking behind her exhaustion. "You'd help me fight a war that isn't yours?" He held her gaze. "Maybe it is. You built something meant to give people their lives back. I've seen too many who never got that chance." For the first time that night, her composure cracked into something real. "You remind me of the kind of soldier my father used to talk about. Just trying to do the next right thing," he said. Her lips curved, tired but genuine. "Then the next right thing is getting ahead of Mercer. He'll come back harder, smarter. And he'll aim where it hurts." Rex lifted his head, ears pricked, eyes following the door as if he already sensed movement there. Ethan stood. "Let him. We'll be ready." Later that night, the city glowed below the tower, bridges lit like veins, fog curling through the lights. In Alexandra's private office, screens flickered with streams of encrypted code. Ethan watched from the window as Rex dozed at his feet, the hum of machines filling the silence. Alexandra typed, her face pale in the glow. "Tomorrow," she said without looking up, "we start phase 2. If Mercer wants Icarus, he'll have to come through us." Ethan turned from the glass. "You sound like you expect a siege." She met his eyes. "I always expect one. The difference now is, I'm not alone in it." Rex stirred, tail thumping once, as if sealing the promise. Outside, thunder rolled faintly over the Pacific. The war for Icarus had begun. Morning arrived gray and restless. The sky over San Francisco hung heavy with low clouds, pressing against the gleaming tops of skyscrapers like a storm that couldn't quite decide whether to break. From the 43rd floor of Horizon Tower, the city looked deceptively calm, just another day of ferries slicing through fog and traffic inching along the Bay Bridge. But inside, tension rippled through every corridor. The security team was doubled. Guards checked badges twice. Technicians huddled over glowing monitors, reviewing logs, combing through data. The word breach had become a ghost in every whisper. Ethan stood by the panoramic window, mug of black coffee in hand. His reflection looked more like the man he'd been overseas, jaw tight, eyes scanning every shadow. Rex sat beside him, watching the glass as if it might show more than sky. Every few minutes, the dog's ears twitched toward a sound no one else heard. Behind them, Alexandra moved through the lab with quiet precision. Her arm was bare today, the faint metallic seam beneath her skin caught the light. She had abandoned her formal tone for clipped efficiency, her voice carrying through the room like the pulse of a commander in battle. Dr. Patel, reroute every Icarus data node through the secondary encryption grid. If Mercer has a backdoor into the mainframe, we'll smoke him out by rerouting. Patel's fingers flew across his keyboard. He's good, Alex. The breach logs show code signatures too adaptive for standard countermeasures. It's like fighting a ghost that rewrites itself. Then we stop using the same playbook, Ethan said. They turned. He stepped closer, setting his mug down. You're fighting on his terms. Pull the servers offline. Disconnect everything until we know what he can reach. Patel hesitated. We'd lose all remote access. Then we go analog, Ethan said flatly. Mercer can't hack paper. Alexandra's eyes met his, the faintest hint of respect flickering there. Do it, she ordered. The lab erupted into motion. Engineers scrambled to isolate systems. Screens dimmed one by one, like a city losing light. The hum of fans and drives faded to silence, leaving only the rhythmic click of keyboards. For a brief moment, it felt like they'd wrestled control back. Then the lights died. All at once, the entire floor plunged into darkness. The air filled with the electronic gasp of shutting systems. Emergency lights snapped on, washing everything in harsh red. Patel swore under his breath. That wasn't us. Rex barked sharply, fur rising along his back. A voice crackled through the intercom, distorted, calm, and far too familiar. Good morning, Horizon, it said. I see you're awake. Alexandra froze. Mercer. The voice continued, smooth as oil. You've always been too sentimental, Alexandra. Too willing to trust the wrong people. Marines. Stray dogs. Deadweight. Ethan's jaw tightened. He's in your comms. Patel typed furiously. I've cut the internal uplink, but he's still feeding through the security loop. He's piggybacking on our surveillance network. Then kill the cameras, Alexandra snapped. I can't. They're locked remotely. The voice chuckled softly. Don't bother. You'll never keep me out. But I do admire your spirit, both of you. Pity it's wasted. The red lights flickered, pulsed once, then stabilized. A soft hum began to fill the air, low, mechanical, growing stronger. Ethan turned toward the far end of the lab just as one of the prototype robotic frames, a quadruped exoskeleton designed for limb mobility testing, jerked to life. Its sensor lights glowed a steady, predatory red. Alexandra, Ethan said quietly, you didn't tell me your lab had teeth. The machine straightened, metal limbs creaking. Then it moved, fast. Down. Ethan shouted. The first swipe of its arm sent a workstation crashing into sparks. Technicians scattered. Patel dove for cover as the exoskeleton pivoted with eerie precision, its servos whining. Rex lunged before Ethan could stop him, barking, circling, darting to draw the thing's attention. The machine's optical sensor tracked him with cold interest. Rex, back. Ethan barked. The dog obeyed, retreating just as the machine's hydraulic limb slammed into the floor where he'd been. The impact cracked tile. Ethan grabbed a steel rod from a support bracket, not much of a weapon, but it would do. He moved low, rolling beneath a flailing arm, striking hard at the joint. Sparks burst. The machine staggered but didn't stop. Patel crawled to a console, typing furiously. I can cut its internal power if I bypass the failsafe. Hurry! Alexandra yelled. The exoskeleton turned toward her voice. Its clawed limb swung wide, too close. Ethan launched himself forward, shoulder slamming into her just as the arms swept past, shattering glass behind them. Patel hit a final key. The machine froze mid-motion, then collapsed, limbs folding in on themselves like a dying spider. Silence fell, broken only by the hiss of ruptured coolant. Alexandra caught her breath, hair falling loose around her face. Ethan helped her up, his hand steady on her shoulder. Mercer's voice returned, faint but smug. "Impressive reflexes, Mr. Granger. Perhaps I underestimated you. But you can't save her from what's already inside." The intercom crackled dead. Alexandra turned sharply to Patel. "Pull every drive connected to the Icarus mainframe. Seal them manually." Patel nodded and hurried off. Ethan looked at her. What did he mean, inside? She hesitated, eyes dark. "He's bluffing." Ethan studied her. "You don't sound sure." Her silence told him everything. Finally, she said, "Icarus isn't just hardware, Ethan. It's integrated, part biological, part digital. If Mercer accessed its framework last night, there's a chance he planted code inside the neural interface." "You're saying he could control it?" "Not yet," she said. "But he could corrupt it." Rex gave a low whine, pacing between them. Ethan looked toward the smashed prototype. "Then we get you out of here before he tries again." She straightened, protest rising. "I can't just abandon the tower." "You can rebuild a tower," he said. "You can't rebuild you." For a moment, neither moved. The soft pulse of the emergency lights painted her face in red and shadow. Then, slowly, she nodded. 15 minutes later, they were moving. Rex trotted ahead, guiding through smoke-thick corridors. Elevators were dead, so they took the service stairwell, 43 floors of concrete and echoing footsteps. Patel had stayed behind to wipe the local servers. "Go," he'd said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I'll buy you 10 minutes. Maybe more." The sound of their descent mixed with distant alarms and the groan of overworked generators. By the time they reached the parking level, Ethan's shirt was damp with sweat. Alexandra's breath came short, her body trembling with exertion she tried to hide. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance, police, fire, maybe both. Ethan guided her toward a black SUV. "Keys." She handed them over without argument. As they climbed in, a deep boom echoed from somewhere above, a muffled explosion that rattled the concrete. Smoke belched from a vent overhead. "Patel," Alexandra whispered, voice cracking. Ethan's jaw set. He knew what he was doing. He floored the accelerator. The SUV roared out of the parking deck, tires screaming against wet asphalt. Through the rearview mirror, Horizon Tower rose behind them, once brilliant, now scarred, a column of smoke twisting into the gray morning. Rex pressed his head against Alexandra's knee, as if to anchor her in the shaking world. She rested a trembling hand on his fur, whispering words that barely reached her lips. Ethan drove in silence, knuckles white on the wheel, eyes locked on the road ahead. "Where to?" he asked finally. She swallowed hard. "North. There's a secondary research site in Mendocino, off-grid. If Mercer wants a war, that's where we'll finish it." He nodded once. "Then that's where we go." Outside, the city blurred past, steel, smoke, and rain merging into one long streak of gray. And in the back seat, Rex kept his gaze fixed on the horizon, every muscle taut, as if he too understood what was coming next. The road north carved through fog and redwood forest, winding like a ribbon cut into the hills. Rain slicked the asphalt, turning every curve into a mirror. Ethan drove with the window cracked, the smell of pine and ocean salt threading through the air. Alexandra sat beside him, silent but awake, her gaze fixed on the passing trees. In daylight, she looked pale again, drained by more than fatigue. A faint shimmer of circuitry glowed occasionally beneath the skin at her temple, like distant lightning beneath clouds. Rex lay stretched across the back seat, head resting on his paws. Every few miles, he lifted his nose toward the wind, checking the scents that slipped through the cracked glass. They'd been driving for hours when the coast finally opened before them, an expanse of grey-blue water framed by cliffs and wind-carved pines. Waves hammered the rocks below with the dull, steady rhythm of artillery. "There," Alexandra said, pointing toward a narrow service road that branched off the highway. A faded sign read, "Private access, authorized personnel only." Ethan turned in without hesitation. Gravel crunched under the tires. The road ended at a cluster of low concrete structures half hidden among the redwoods. Moss and sea spray had aged the walls to a mottled green. A chain-link fence surrounded the compound, but the gate hung slightly open, padlock twisted off. Ethan killed the engine. The silence afterward felt too still. Rex was the first to move, ears pricked, tail rigid. He gave a single, low bark that echoed against the trees. Alexandra frowned. "It's never unlocked." Ethan scanned the area. The gravel bore fresh tire tracks, thin and deliberate. He stepped out, pistol drawn from the glove compartment, an old sidearm, legal or not, he hadn't left it behind. "Stay close," he said. They advanced through the gate. The air smelled faintly of metal and damp cedar. Somewhere far off, gulls cried over the surf. Inside the compound, the doors stood ajar. The lights inside flickered weakly, running on backup power. The hum of computers filled the hallways, soft but insistent, like a heart that refused to stop beating. Alexandra led him down a corridor lined with glass walls and humming servers. "This was our contingency site," she said quietly. "If Horizon ever went offline, this lab could run independently for months." Ethan glanced at her. "Could Mercer have known about it?" She shook her head. Only 4 people had the access codes. Patel was one of them. They reached the central lab, a round chamber dominated by a glass cylinder in the center. Inside, a humanoid frame stood suspended, half-complete, cables and sensors running from its spine like veins of light. Ethan stared. "What the hell is that?" "Icarus Prime," Alexandra said. "The final model. It was supposed to integrate the neural interface seamlessly, mind and machine as one. And if Mercer gets it, then he controls everything it touches." Rex growled suddenly, low and steady. Ethan turned. In the reflection on the glass wall, a shape moved, a flicker of motion at the far end of the room. He spun, weapon raised. "Show yourself." A man stepped out of the shadows, hands raised just enough to mock the gesture of surrender. He wore a gray windbreaker, dark jeans, and the kind of smile that didn't bother reaching his eyes. "Relax, Mr. Granger. If I wanted you dead, I wouldn't bother walking in." Ethan's grip tightened. "Mercer. In the flesh," he said lightly, strolling forward. "Or what's left of it worth showing." Alexandra's voice was ice. "How did you find this place?" "Oh, Alexandra," Mercer said, his tone almost fond. "You built your empire on connectivity. Did you really think you could cut yourself off and not leave a signal behind?" He gestured around the lab. "Beautiful, isn't it? All that potential trapped in one quiet corner of the world." Ethan moved slightly to the side, keeping himself between Mercer and Alexandra. "What do you want?" "Simple," Mercer replied. "The source code. The neural mapping algorithm you buried in the Icarus core. With it, I can finish what you started." "You mean weaponize it," she said. He smiled faintly. "Call it evolution. You built a bridge between human thought and machine precision. I intend to cross it first." Rex growled, the sound deep and warning. Mercer's eyes flicked toward the dog. "Ah yes, the loyal guardian. Remarkable creature. It's fitting, really. You built your interface to mimic the trust between soldier and hound, didn't you?" Alexandra's jaw tightened. "Get out." He stepped closer. "You can't stop what's coming, Alexandra. Even if you destroy every file here, the architecture lives in you. And I already have the keys. Ethan's brow furrowed. Meaning? Mercer's smile widened. Meaning I don't need your servers anymore. I just need time. Before Ethan could react, the emergency lights flickered again, and a surge of static tore through the speakers. Alexandra gasped, clutching her temple as the circuitry beneath her skin pulsed violently. Alexandra. Ethan caught her as she staggered, her body trembling with pain. Mercer's voice echoed through the room, amplified now through the lab's intercom. You see, Mr. Granger. The interface is a door. And I already have one foot inside. Ethan raised his gun, but Mercer only laughed, and the lights went out completely. When they flickered back on, Mercer was gone. The only sound left was the hum of the machines and the shallow, uneven rhythm of Alexandra's breathing. Ethan steadied her against the console. Her eyes were wide, unfocused, as though seeing something far away. He's in the network, she whispered. He's in me. Rex barked once, sharp and urgent, pulling Ethan back to the moment. He looked toward the exit, the gate they'd entered through now glowed red on the security panel. Locked from the outside. Then we find a way to get him out, Ethan said, voice low, certain. He holstered the gun, turned to the dog. Rex, guard. The shepherd moved instantly, planting himself between Alexandra and the dark corridor beyond. His ears flattened, muscles coiled. Outside, thunder cracked above the Pacific. The storm had followed them north. Alexandra lifted her head, pain still flickering behind her eyes. He can trigger the Icarus failsafe remotely. If he does, it'll wipe everything, including me. Ethan met her gaze. Then we don't give him the chance. He grabbed a flashlight and moved toward the door. Where are you going? She asked. To cut the power at the source, he said. If Mercer wants a war in the dark, I'll make sure it's pitch black. Rex growled softly, ready. And somewhere in the hum of servers and rain, a faint voice whispered through the speakers, Mercer again, almost amused. Let's see how far the Marine will go to save his machine. The elevator shaft was dead. Every control panel Ethan touched gave only a hiss of static. So he pried the doors open by hand. Cold air spilled up from the depths of the compound, a mix of oil, seawater, and ozone. Somewhere far below, turbines groaned, turning on the last breath of backup power. The place smelled like a machine trying to stay alive. He found the maintenance ladder, clipped his flashlight to his vest, and started down. The beam carved narrow cones of light through the dark, catching flakes of salt on the metal rungs. Rex waited at the top for a heartbeat, whining softly. Stay with her, Ethan said. That's an order. The dog's ears twitched. For a second, Ethan thought he might disobey. Then Rex turned back toward the lab, claws scraping lightly over the floor as he vanished into the red-lit corridor. Ethan kept climbing. The descent felt endless, 20, maybe 30 stories below ground, carved right into the cliffside. Every few steps, he felt the vibration of waves hammering the rock outside. Halfway down, his radio crackled. Alexandra's voice bled through, distorted, faint. Ethan, don't, he's inside. Then static swallowed her. He moved faster. At the bottom, the ladder ended in a narrow tunnel lined with rusting pipes. Water pooled at his boots, icy and rising. Ahead, a dull blue glow flickered through the mist, the generator room. He pushed through the door. The chamber was cathedral high, filled with humming turbines and coolant conduits that steamed faintly in the damp air. At its center, a massive console pulsed with light. The hum was steady, rhythmic, like breathing. He approached, flashlight sweeping across the control board. Mercer's voice echoed faintly through the intercom again, cool and disembodied. Persistent, aren't you, Marine? I almost respect it. Ethan's jaw tightened. Come out and say that to my face. Oh, I'm already here, Mercer said. Every circuit. Every current. You're standing inside me. The lights surged brighter, flickering in sync with his words. A figure began to form on the central monitor, a grainy digital rendering of Mercer's face, lines of code crawling across his eyes. I told you, Alexandra built a door. You just walked through it. Ethan scanned the control board. One lever was marked primary grid shutdown, locked under a safety cover. He smashed the glass with the butt of his flashlight. Mercer's voice sharpened. If you cut the power now, you'll fry her interface. Her heart sank to this system. Ethan froze, hand hovering over the switch. You're lying. Am I? Mercer said softly. Ask her. The radio on Ethan's vest crackled again. Alexandra's voice came through, raw with pain. He's right. My vitals are tethered. If you kill the core, it'll stop me too. Ethan's pulse thundered. Then what the hell am I supposed to do? Her reply was barely a whisper. Find the manual relay. Far side of the turbines. It isolates my connection. You have 5 minutes before he reroutes. He ran. Water sloshed higher around his knees. The walkway trembled as the turbines accelerated. Sparks jumped from the conduits, painting the room in blue flashes. Faster, Marine, Mercer taunted. You can't win a war you don't understand. Ethan ignored him, vaulting over a fallen pipe. He reached the far wall, rows of breaker panels glowed behind a cage of mesh. There, one marked BO-Link Control, Icarus Core. He ripped the mesh aside, grabbed the lever, and yanked. The room screamed. Light surged up the walls, every turbine howling as if alive. Then, suddenly, silence, followed by the sharp crack of something shorting out. Ethan staggered backward, chest heaving. Above him, the intercom flared with Mercer's roar, digital, distorted, furious. You think this ends me? You've only killed her protection. Then the voice cut off, replaced by the heavy pulse of backup alarms. Ethan didn't wait. He sprinted for the ladder, water now waist deep. Upstairs, Rex stood guard beside Alexandra's chair. She was half-conscious, skin pale, the veins along her neck flickering with light. The hum of the neural link rose in pitch. When Ethan burst in, Rex barked once, a warning and relief all at once. She's seizing. Ethan shouted, dropping to his knees beside her. The monitors spiked, showing impossible vitals. Alexandra's eyes snapped open, irises shot through with light. Her voice came layered, doubled, hers and Mercer's overlapping. You shouldn't have cut the link, she gasped. He's trapped inside. Ethan held her shoulders. Fight him. You're stronger than he is. Rex whined, circling them, uncertain. Alexandra's head jerked back, a surge of energy sparking from the implants at her temple. Every monitor in the room exploded into static. Mercer's distorted voice came through the speakers again, ragged now. If I can't control her, I'll burn her out. Ethan grabbed the emergency panel on the wall, slamming switches until sparks showered from the ceiling. Not today. The lights flared once, then all at once went black. For a long heartbeat, there was only the sound of breathing, theirs and Rex's, echoing in the dark. Then, slowly, Alexandra's trembling stopped. The glow beneath her skin faded to a faint, steady pulse. Ethan brushed her hair from her face. Hey. You're still here. Her eyes opened, clear, exhausted, but hers. Did we stop him? He exhaled, half laughing from sheer relief. We stopped something. Rex nudged her hand with his nose, tail wagging weakly. She smiled faintly. Good boy. Then the floor shuddered. Dust fell from the ceiling. A low, metallic groan rippled through the entire facility. Somewhere deep below, a turbine exploded, Mercer's failsafe finally triggering. Ethan looked up. The core's collapsing. He scooped her into his arms. Time to go. Rex was already at the door, barking urgently. They ran, through smoke, flickering lights, the thunder of the Pacific pounding outside. Each hallway seemed shorter than the last, each breath harder to catch. When they burst into the open air, the first of the explosions rolled through the complex. Fire shot from the vents, painting the fog red. Ethan threw an arm around Alexandra, shielding her from debris. Rex pressed against their legs, ears flattened. Behind them, the Mendocino facility sank into flame and darkness, swallowed by the cliffs and sea. Alexandra looked back once, her voice small but steady. Everything we built, gone. Ethan shook his head. Not everything. Rex barked once, tail thumping against her leg. They stood there for a long moment, watching the smoke curl into the sky. The Pacific wind cut cold across the cliffs. Smoke drifted from the ruins below, blending into the gray morning like ghosts leaving the earth. Ethan stood on the edge of the overlook, jacket torn, face streaked with soot. The sound of the sea pounded against the rocks below, deep, endless, alive. Behind him, Rex nosed through the damp grass, circling before lying down near Alexandra. She sat wrapped in a wool blanket, her gaze distant on the horizon. The firelight from their small camp flickered against her pale face, glinting faintly where the circuitry under her skin caught the glow. For a while, none of them spoke. The silence felt earned. Finally, Alexandra said, "It's strange. I built a system meant to connect people, and it nearly destroyed the only ones who ever truly reached me." Ethan glanced over. "You built it to heal." Mercer twisted that. "There's a difference." She nodded slowly, fingers tightening around the edge of the blanket. "He's still in there, you know. Fragments of code, ghost lines in the neural pattern. I can feel them flicker when I close my eyes." "You can erase him." "Not completely," she said quietly. "But maybe that's the point. The human brain learns from scars." Rex lifted his head, watching her with steady gold eyes. When she met his gaze, something gentler passed through her expression. "He trusts without question," she murmured. "That's what I tried to design into Icarus, instinctive empathy. I think he had it all along." Ethan smiled faintly. He didn't need a lab for it. The wind shifted, bringing the smell of salt and charred metal. Down below, the fires were dying out, leaving only blackened shapes where the facility had stood. Alexandra's voice softened. "We lost everything tangible. The servers, the code, the funding, it's all gone." "Maybe that's the clean start you needed," Ethan said. She looked at him. "And what about you, Marine? What do you go back to now?" He shrugged, gazing out at the horizon. "Same thing as before. A quiet workshop, a stubborn truck, and a dog who thinks he runs the place." Her lips curved in a tired smile. "That sounds almost peaceful." "Peace," he said, "is earned. You've earned yours." For a moment, she didn't answer. Then she reached into her jacket and drew out a small metal drive, the last surviving fragment of Icarus's core algorithm. "I saved one piece," she said. "Not to rebuild. To remember. But I can't hold it forever." She offered it to him. "Maybe you'll know when it's time to destroy it, or to share it." Ethan took it carefully, feeling its weight. It was smaller than his thumb, yet somehow heavy as a promise. Rex leaned against his leg, tail brushing his boot. Alexandra turned her eyes back to the sea. "Do you ever think about what comes next?" "Every day," he said. "Usually right before it happens." She laughed softly, the first real laugh he'd heard from her. The fog began to lift as the sun pushed through, gilding the edges of the cliffs in gold. Waves caught the light and shattered it into 1,000 moving sparks. Ethan crouched beside Rex, scratching behind his ear. "You ready to head home, buddy?" Rex barked once, sharp and certain. Ethan looked back at Alexandra. "You'll be all right." She met his eyes, calm and clear. "I think for the first time, yes. I'll rebuild, not the company, but something smaller. Something human." He nodded. "That's a good plan." When he stood, she reached out, touching his arm lightly. "Thank you, for everything. You didn't have to stay." He met her gaze. "You didn't have to survive. But you did." Her smile faltered just slightly, the emotion beneath it raw and unguarded. "If I ever rebuild Icarus, it'll be because of you." He glanced at the drive in his palm, then slipped it into his pocket. "Then build it right this time." She nodded once. "Goodbye, Ethan." He hesitated. "It's never really goodbye. Just distance." Rex barked again, impatient to move. Ethan gave a half-smile, turned toward the truck parked near the cliff road, and whistled. Rex bounded ahead, tail high. As they walked away, Alexandra watched until they disappeared into the curve of the road. Then she looked back at the sea, endless, untamable, and whispered, "Thank you, both." Hours later, the truck rumbled south through the redwoods. The radio stayed off, the only sound was the wind and the steady rhythm of tires over wet asphalt. Rex's head rested on Ethan's arm, eyes half closed. Ethan glanced once at the horizon. The sun was setting, streaking the clouds in red and gold. Somewhere behind them, a woman with fire in her mind was learning how to be whole again. He reached into his pocket, pulling out the small drive. The last trace of everything they'd fought for. He turned it over in his fingers once, then rolled down the window and looked at the light catching the ocean far below. Rex stirred, watching him. Ethan smiled faintly. "Some things aren't meant to be owned, huh?" Then, without ceremony, he flicked the drive out the window. It arced once through the air, glinting in the sun, before vanishing into the sea. Rex barked once, sharp and approving. Ethan chuckled. "That's what I thought." The road curved along the cliffs, the last of the light fading behind them. Ahead, the world opened wide again, quiet, uncertain, alive. Rex pressed against his shoulder, and Ethan reached down, resting a hand on his fur. "Come on, boy," he said. "Let's go home." The truck rolled on into the dusk, carrying with it the last echoes of war and the quiet beginning of peace.